What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Echoes, a Notre Dame podcast. Mike Golic Jr., Jessica Smetana with you as we are each and every week still here after the season. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review if you haven't already at the Echoes ND Pod. Clips, content, all still going to keep coming despite the fact that Notre Dame season has come to an end. And Jess, this is kind of a weird feeling for us, right? We're coming back here and we've got some great stuff to react to. Like we had the award circuit go on. We had some guys up for big hardware, take home big hardware, all that good stuff. We've got an outlook into the offseason, some basketball updates that we've been promising around here. But this is the first time you and I have come in here on a Monday in quite some time without an actual game to react to. So how was your first weekend in a good minute without Notre Dame football?
Not even just that, Mike. We don't have any guests today because there was no game last weekend, but we had athletic director Doak on. So if you want to go back and listen to that, if you missed it last week, you should check it out. But yeah, Mike, this is going to be like the old days, like 3 months ago, and it was just you and me talking before the season started. But like you said, we do have a lot we want to cover. And my weekend was cold. I spent it with a lot of children. And so it was fine. How was your weekend? Did you watch the Heisman ceremony?
I did watch the Heisman ceremony in between bouts of pluribus on Apple TV, nice. Which has been very enjoyable. But yeah, I remember opening up the screen to look at the Heisman because obviously our sweet baby Jeremiyah Love, who you are representing proudly in the background, was one of the guys in New York as a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. And so I wanted to see that. And it's this just daunting reminder that everything is for television. So I opened it up when it got on, saw that it was an hour, and I was like, oh, I can keep watching my episode because I've seen all of these features run at one point or another in the lead up to this. And so I'll come in and see the outfits. I had to kind of explain Jeremiyah Love's sneaker choice to some people in my life who weren't as familiar with Christian Dior. But other than that, seeing outfits, I was like, all right, I'll check in at the start. And then I'll check in when they actually hand out the hardware and hear what ended up being a delightful speech from Fernando Mendoza that was every bit of the plucky underdog turned very inspirational story that college football was probably expecting after his post-game interview in the Big Ten Championship. Did you enjoy it? Was it good? Was it what you expected from him?
Yeah, it was. Like you said, the show is an hour long, and they didn't name the finalist or the award winner until 8 p.m. It went 11 minutes past, I think, when this show was supposed to end, which I thought was very funny. But it was nice that all 4 of those players were invited to the awards, and going over the final vote tallies afterwards, seeing Jeremiyah Love got 46 first place votes, that made me very happy. But there's a few parts of this I want to talk about with you from a big picture awards perspective. So for one, do you think there is a world in which Jeremiyah Love doesn't get injured against Stanford in the last game of the season and either finishes in second place or maybe even wins the Heisman Trophy? Or do you feel like because of the way Heisman voting is these days, the best quarterback, best team guy is always going to have an edge?
I think that is always going to be a hard force to overcome, especially when, that quarterback also had some big moments that he was a part of. Everyone could go back to Heisman moment, the Omar Cooper Jr. throw against Penn State, certainly some big throws in the Big Ten Championship that everyone was around watching. It's kind of like when we talk about the College Football Playoff Committee, the only time they're together watching games all year is on Conference Championship weekend. And so I am always interested in how those results kind of appear prorated based on what they're all seeing, talking about together in that room in real time. And I think the same is kind of true for how people view it. I mean, going into that weekend, it was framed as, oh, the winner of the Big Ten Championship in Julian Sand or Fernando Mendoza was going to have the edge in winning the Heisman Trophy. So I do think if Jeremiyah, even though that game was played late at night, had another version of the Pitt game, the Syracuse game, all these ones where in the month of November he had really balled out, then yeah, it's probably a little bit closer just because you saw a number of people compare stats from past winners this year. It was not a class among the quarterbacks, particularly with Fernando Mendoza, that, exists in the same air statistically in the counting stuff as Johnny Manziel was one of the comps I saw brought up. The Joe Burrow season, such an outlier in so many ways. And so it wasn't an overwhelming consensus because the guy who ended up winning it was not even statistically the quarterback that profiled the best, but he was one whose impact influenced winning in major ways for the team that's one of the biggest stories in college football right now. So and I don't want that to sound like he's not deserving. He's
no, not at all.
Deserving.
I don't think either of us would argue that he's not a deserving Heisman Trophy winner. Do you think, like, going back to the numbers though, like, do you think we'll see Joe Burrow 2019 numbers in college football again? Because it does seem like there's fewer possessions now per game. You know, there's been rule changes. The offenses have changed a little bit. Defenses have gotten better. Like, do you think that that's just a trend that's going to continue where you're not going to have a quarterback win the Heisman that has like 4,000 yards and 45 touchdowns or something like that?
Yeah, the fewer possessions a game thing's like a really interesting macro note for the sport, especially for some of these teams that anticipate making a deep playoff run. Like, I forget who it was or was talking about, like, it did that and, like, basically was able to take an entire game's worth of snaps off their guys over the course of a long season. But no, I'm sure we'll get to that point again. I mean, we've got incredibly talented quarterbacks still coming up the pipes. We've got a sport that's going to lean into that more than ever. And more of those guys are going to be spread out. The one thing you can maybe knock is like that team also had the guys that would go on to become the two top receivers in the NFL on that
Right.
team. And I don't know if like, yeah, I guess I should say that like Ohio State has Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith on their team. Like the ingredients are all still out there. So yeah, I think we'll get back to that still. Even maybe if they don't touch those numbers, I absolutely think we still have the parts capable for that.
Well, I think that I would have liked to see the world in which maybe Jeremiah Love doesn't get kneed in the ribs against Stanford. But I think it also probably would have taken mediocre Big Ten championship performance from both Ohio
Yeah.
State and Indiana quarterbacks to see him win the award. But I would, last year maybe an outlier too with a non-quarterback winning. I would like to see running backs get some credit, Mike, from Heisman voters in the future. There have not been very many Heisman finalist running backs in the last decade since Derrick Henry won the award. Bryce Love, Ashton Genty, and
Yeah.
now Jeremiah Love, the only three. And Jeremiah Love, of course, the first Notre Dame finalist since Manti Te'o was the second place Heisman finalist in 2012. So it was I think, we talked to him a month ago and it sounded like he really wanted to be a part of this weekend to put Notre Dame on a pedestal. This was like a personal goal of his. So even though he didn't win the award, I am happy he was able to partake in the festivities. And it was nice seeing Marcus Freeman there and the
Was
ongoing
was
discourse
that the
of
first time that we had seen Marcus since the playoff snub announcement? Was that the first time he had spoke publicly?
first time being interviewed, I believe. I had seen videos of him on the award circuit with Leonard Moore from last weekend, and like the Notre Dame social team has put stuff out. And we talked about this off air too. Marcus, a lot of fans want to hear from Marcus Freeman and hear him just kind of like be like, "Hey, I'm still your coach, and let's spin it forward to 2026." Especially after last week when Pete Bavacqua did various interviews and media, and we didn't really hear from Marcus Freeman. But I can't remember which Notre Dame beat reporter. I think it might have been Eric Hansen said the last 2 seasons Marcus has not done any media post last game. Like last year, he did the post game national championship press conference and then didn't talk to the media till March when spring ball started. So I would not be surprised if we didn't hear from him at any point. But he was on TV with Holly Rowe and Jeremiah Love, did the old, now I got to convince him to come back next year tease that Notre Dame fans are like, just tell us already. We know he's not
Oh.
coming back. And nor should he, because
I was going to say, that
he's
was my
gonna be a
least favorite
first
part of this weekend is
round
people
draft
trying to parse through his answers. Like, oh, maybe is he coming back? Like, no. And if you care about him, you would tell him to leave too. It's a patently absurd idea at that position specifically for someone with his future to come back and use another year that could be going towards his second contract in the NFL on us. I love him. It'd be great to see him back in a uniform selfishly, but he needs to be gone. Like, and just make it official. He deserves that.
Yeah, and he also won the Doak Walker Award, which is the award for the nation's best running back, which is awesome. He's the first Notre Dame player to win that award, which started in 1990. So that is huge. If you look through the list of running backs who have won that award, it is a great indicator of future NFL success. It is a list of some really good NFL running backs, including Jonathan Taylor, who won it twice. So before we move on to the rest of the awards and stuff, though, Mike, I know you're a Heisman voter. You haven't told me who you voted for Heisman, so you can reveal it to me so I can judge you now.
All right. Okay. I've been waiting for this moment. And it was incredibly difficult. You and I talked off air about, just the decision making around a lot of these guys. But for anyone unaware, too, you get like you see these lists like the top 10 Heisman vote getters, and they exist. They put out the 6 through 10 part of the list in the week leading up to it. You only get 3 votes as a Heisman voter. So like all those guys that were on there in the top 10, somebody voted for them in any of those spots. And I'd seen plenty of people with Jacob Rodriguez on their ballot. I saw people that had David Bailey, the defensive end from Texas Tech, on their ballot as well.
Downs,
so a lot of people getting that shine. Ohio State had 3 guys in the top 10, which is insane. Like, what?
And also,
team.
I was literally looking at 2016 mock drafts earlier, and I was like, Jesus, there's so many Ohio State players in the first 2 rounds on these. But also, Mike, like the prompt that you are given as a Heisman voter is what? It's just like who's the most outstanding player in college football. It's not like who's the best player, who's the MVP of the football season. It's like very kind of nebulously most outstanding, right?
Yeah, it's like every other MVP discussion, to where it's kind of whatever you want it to be in terms of, is it the most impactful player on their team? Is it the best player in the sport? Like all that different stuff. Like I just, and like my North Star for that is a lot more nebulous as well. It's like, who was the most outstanding player? Who did I watch that believe impacted their team at winning at a high level? Like that's still an important part of all this, but also like was so singularly impactful in their own way. So I had, in order, Jeremiyah Love at number 1, Diego Pavia at number 2, and Fernando Mendoza at number 3. And like, if you ask me, like, and my thing too is like, would I be able to defend that if pressed on it? Like, if you asked me to go and find the stats, the clips, the on-field production to support any of those, it's very, very easy. But ultimately, what it came down to, like we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, and maybe part of it is I've gotten to see so much of Jeremiyah Love during this time period. But like, I made sure to go back and watch a ton of Vanderbilt, a ton of Indiana. Like I wanted to go and see all of these guys in the high leverage games, in the biggest moments. And I just felt like for Jeremiyah, he answered the bell in so many big moments for this team. He did so, like we talked about, with a lack of volume that a lot of his predecessors who have won the award certainly had, but still found a way to, at important junctures for the team and big moments, to find the play that ends up sparking it for his team, even though he's not a quarterback who gets to touch the ball every play. See, early in the season, the Miami game that everyone wanted to throw in his face, like he didn't have control over how that game was called. And so I had him first, like Pavia second. To me, among the quarterback conversation, it was hard to come away from his tape every time and think about what that Vanderbilt team would be without him. Like he is a staggeringly important gravitational force on that team. And then Fernando, all the reasons that we mentioned, like he's a very deserving winner. He was 3rd on my ballot. Like he still got points from that in this discussion. But yeah, that was my order.
Yeah, and Pavia and Mendoza both kind of have like a little bit of a underdog story to them. Like neither were super highly. I mean, Diego Pavia literally had no offers coming out of high school, played at a JUCO, and then of course transferred and then ended up at Vanderbilt. So if you go by like the storyline narrative of it, I think that is a lot of the thing that voters also look at when they're voting. But very defensible choices for me. I will not be making fun of you for that.
It's interesting though you mentioned that part of it though, because like Jeremiyah, like his story, the game day story that Jen Latta did on College Game Day, got run again during this, and like he won the Disney Spirit Award in large part because of that. Like you could argue pretty strong narrative backing for him as well.
I feel like I don't have to explain that on our Notre Dame podcast though.
No, yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I think, and I love that Chris Fowler asked him about Jeremiah Star when they were doing the stand-up interviews during the Heisman ceremony. But yes, narratively, all 3 tremendous college football success stories, Mike.
Man, wild weekend, the after party for Diego Pavia too. Like we're not a Vanderbilt pod, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on that. But having to have a statement put out, I mean, you put out a statement. I'd love to see what part in hand and he writing that he had. But after the board, like the bottle service light up board at the club, you had saying F Indiana and were pictured giving that sign the middle finger, and in an Instagram post telling the voters to F themselves or something is a wild night out of trying to cope with that after. So again, that doesn't change how I feel about voting for him, but man, just a tough 24 hours following that.
definitely probably woke up with some regrets, but also I maybe not knowing his personality a little bit, watching the last couple years, maybe he totally owns that. But yeah, so last four Heisman winners. Last thing I want to mention, all transfer players, Mike.
Mm.
Um, I think last year we kind of can throw that one out because that was a bit of a unique and rare situation for Travis Hunter and Deion Sanders, of course. But what do we make of that as a trend that so many of the last, I would say even maybe going back to even 2019, I would say, Mike, so many transfer players winning the Heisman. What do you make of that? Is that a trend? Is that just something like you will expect to see now, especially in a largely quarterback dominated award?
Yeah, I think it's just largely unavoidable. Like, this is where the sport is right now. We see the transfer and portal numbers in mass every year. And like, I don't know, like in calling college football games now, this is like the clearest indicator where like usually you have your game board, it's got bios for each guy on it. And it used to be like you'd have a guy and he would have this school and like one other school on his bio and then his high school in there. Now, for a lot of these guys, you cannot fit their college bios in the game board in the space that you're allotted because they're at 3, 4, 5 schools. Like the process is just different. So the likelihood that any player has transferred along their journey is so much higher. And especially at quarterback, like I always think of early 2000s USC where you just had this bottleneck at the position. They would wait 3 years, play 1 year, be a Heisman winner or a Heisman finalist, and then be a top level draft pick and keep going. Like now those guys are there for a year. And if they're not going to be the multi-year starter, it's usually buckshot. Like the Arch Manning situation is incredibly rare in the modern version of the sport. So to me, that's kind of it. I don't know if you think of something different.
No, I think it's the same, and I think that maybe CJ Carr will be the quarterback to buck that trend next year. Fingers crossed, Mike, because he's probably going to be a favorite going into the 2026 season, as well as Leonard Moore, probably a favorite to hopefully be the first Notre Dame player to win the Jim Thorpe Award? Question mark, because once again, snubbed by the awards voters. Notre Dame has never had a player win that award. However, the best wide receiver in college football, the Bolitnikoff Award winner, was Makai Lemon. Now, I'll take you back a couple months, Mike, but I saw one cornerback play against one wide receiver in South Bend and did a very good job making sure he didn't do too much damage on the field. So riddle me that one.
I was furious. And like, again, it's another one of those like Caleb Downs is incredible. Like we're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about that guy as potentially a top 5 pick at safety. Like it's not normal. And yes, I can understand how he won, but it was that exact comparison of like, you just gave him the Golden Boy at wide receiver award over the Ohio State wide receiver. That I don't know if you saw Jeremiah Smith's post. I would be very afraid if I
Yeah,
was a defensive back in the college football playoff
same.
at the level of rage that young man is about to carry into this dance because it is terrifying. But you just gave the Golden Wide Receiver Boy Award to the guy at USC that he went out there and and I don't want to hear from anybody else any caveats about that. Go and turn back on the tape. 15 went and guarded Makai Lemon and made him a non-factor in that game basically the entire day. So that irked me a lot. But as I reminded myself, again, this is not a Caleb Downs conversation. Really, it's about next year. If Leonard Moore does what he did this year,
Yeah.
next year, with all the narrative inertia going into that season and is not rewarded with that, I'm going to snap. But these are also the same people. And like, I don't want to slight Kobe Bryant back in his days at Cincinnati, but they gave him the Thorpe over Sauce Gardner, who was clearly the better defensive back in that room, but just never got thrown at because he was such a lockdown force on that side of the field and in the boundary. No one threw that way. And so they didn't. And so once I saw that, I'm like, all right, I got to take what y'all do with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is a perfectly good defensible decision. This to me is eyes on next year and making sure that the Leonard Moore Thorpe Award campaign gets off the ground early because he deserves it.
One thing that struck me, I would say, 2 seasons ago is when Xavier Watts won the Bronco Nagurski Award for the best defensive player, but not the Thorpe Award for the best defensive back. That seems to be like in conflict with one another as well. And I understand these awards are all like different organizing bodies and whatnot, but I would like to see a Notre Dame player win this award. I think that's a long-term, not even a stretch goal, just a regular goal for Marcus Freeman as long as he's the head coach at Notre Dame. I mean, he's put defensive backs on the map at Notre Dame in a position that, historically was not what you would say the strongest at ND. So let's get some awards recognition for them. Leonard Moore and Jeremiyah Love were named Walter Camp first team players. So we're on unanimous All-American watch for those two, Mike. Both should be deserving. Weirdly enough, Notre Dame, the team that played in the national championship last year, had no unanimous All-Americans, had Xavier Watts as a consensus American because he was unanimous in 2023. And then I forget, Pro Football Writers of America, I think, didn't vote him on their first team. He was like second team. So dropped out, which was crazy and was a consensus All-American last year. But anyways, I think, we will let people know once those come in, because those are great honors for ND players who don't get like first team all conference, like you're just playing for national awards if you play at Notre Dame. So hoping Moore and Love at least get recognition there.
I think that should be a pretty strong slam dunk. And if anyone's unfamiliar, unanimous means all 5 major news outlets vote you to their first team All-American status. And those guys, incredibly deserving of that. And you're right. Like the larger thing is it's kind of about codifying what we've all seen and noticed, especially on the side with Leonard Moore. Like I said before the season, Benjamin Morrison had been the best Notre Dame cornerback of my lifetime. And he is immediately usurped by Leonard Moore, who is better cornerback than him. And, as a draft prospect, because of size and everything like that, I think is going to be even more coveted than BMO was, even knowing injury played a factor in that. But to have that stamp and to show, like, that is, you're right, a Marcus Freeman stat. He was there at Cincinnati with those 2 corners that I mentioned and was a part of why that room was so great. And now that's been transposed over here to South Bend in a way that's really, really impressive. So, we look forward to that honor for them. Definitely.
There's 2 things that I would like to see next year for this team. Well, we're talking in the context of awards, Mike. I'd like to see the offensive line back in the mix with the Joe Moore Award finalists. That, I think, is a goal. If you're Notre Dame, you should always be in that conversation. And I would also like to see Notre Dame have a defensive lineman in the mix for postseason awards. I think that those 2 position groups, like, really important for, success on the football field, obviously. But like, if you look at national championship winning teams over the last however many years, you're seeing like the best of both of those. Like, you're seeing elite pass rushers and you're seeing very good offensive line. So that's what I would like to see next year. And hopefully Boubacar Traore comes back. I saw he was a finalist for Comeback Player of the Year. This feels like the type of player that in a NIL era comes back, improves their draft stock, gets paid, doesn't go to the NFL right away. Came off an injury last year. So hopefully, like, we'll see him come back, but also, we'll have CJ Carr and Tay Johnson probably, and others on the preseason watch list as well.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we put a pin in that and take a quick break? Because I think kind of looking at some of the like early things to keep an eye on for next year could be a lot of fun with where we're going into now in the offseason, where people are going to be focused on who are the guys that are potential candidates to come back, what is the next step for Notre Dame going into next year, and plenty more of that. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with a little more look into the football offseason and some long-awaited updates on men's and women's hoops around South Bend.
College football not feeling as juicy as it once did? Let me put you onto something that'll shake up your Saturday and every other day of the week.
Because now that Wendy's has crispy chicken tendies and a powerhouse lineup of new sauces, it's time you transfer to the hottest team in the league.
That's right, Team Tendies. Wendy's Tendies. They're making their undeniable rookie season one for the books. Enjoy first-string flavor from some 5-star recruits. Rep your new favorite team everywhere you go, but make sure to cheer with your mouth closed.
Take it to the end zone of savory sauces like honey barbecue, creamy ranch, and the new Wendy's signature sauce to experience a total taste bud blitz of flavor. It's time to join a team that won't upset you with an upset.
Taste the phenom that's gracing the gridiron with its juicy, crispy, and tendery tendencies. Don't fumble the bag. Commit to Team Tendies and call the most delicious plays in the playbook.
All right, huddle up, guys. Tendies on 3. Tendies on 3. 1, 2, 3, Tendies! Let's do this. Wendy's Chicken Tendies, now at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Welcome back to the Echoes. Mike, before we get to our continued conversation about the football team, we do have a news item we need to discuss and a long-awaited update on the men's and women's basketball team we've been promising our listeners for weeks. But let's start with the basketball leprechaun, which was unveiled last week. I believe, was it Wednesday morning? Basketball leprechaun
I think you're right.
Was unveiled. What are your thoughts on it?
I thought it was awesome. Like, my biggest question with a lot of these sports specific was what was the pose going to be? And crossover leprechaun, who I saw, I believe Mike Bray tweeted about it and said he surmised that it was a Jerry and Grant crossover that he thought was the closest, like, basis for that player wise. So
right, because football leprechaun's canonically Xavier Watts. So basketball leprechaun is Jerry and Grant. You're right. He said, sure looks like Jerry and Grant's crossover at Jerry and Grant. So great. I like it too. I'm excited to have some merch with that on it to go with my hockey leprechaun and my football leprechaun and TBD which other leprechauns we get in the future. But unfortunate timing unveiling it, but it's very cute.
Yeah, it is. It is incredible. So yeah, Jess, let's get to that. You want to start with the men's here, since obviously, like, this is a program caught in a pretty interesting juncture right now in terms of, like, hey, they've had some pretty nice wins on the season, but the Marcus Burton injury kind of is the cloud hanging over all this.
Yeah, we waited so long to do our update that Marcus Burton is now hurt and out indefinitely, which absolutely stinks, Mike. And I'm so bummed for him. He's dealt with a number of injuries over the last couple of seasons. So really sad to see that. But I think my expectations, yes, they have become a little bit hazier for this team. This team I would have loved to see legitimately, like, play well in the ACC and make the NCAA tournament. That's kind of the goal, I think, is just to, like, be fun and have fun and make the tournament. Now I'm like, I don't know if that's realistic or not. We've only seen a couple games without Burton. Conference play hasn't started yet. But that all being said, I have had a really fun time watching this team so far this year. The freshman phenom, Jalen Harrelson, Mike, is really good. He's gotten better every game, I think. The transfer player that Notre Dame got from Northern Arizona, Carson Tout, already has 116 rebounds on the season. He's averaging 10 rebounds a game. Sir Muhammad had a really good game this past weekend offensively. And more news. Mark Zachary, the corner from the football team, is now joining the basketball team because they need help at point guard because of the Burton injury. So this all comes full circle back to football. But I loved Micah Shrewsbury's comment on it after the game last week. He did a little press conference humor, Mike. He was someone asked him about, like, football players joining the basketball team, and he said that the football team's full of hoopers. He said Tay is a hooper. Leonard Moore can hoop. He said CJ, he's seen him hoop. They're all good basketball players, but Mark Zachary fit the need that the basketball team had. He said those other guys can hoop. I wasn't even going to ask about Leonard Moore. I knew the answer to that one. And then everyone chuckled. So I enjoyed that. And I think when the men's basketball team is fun and having fun, I don't know. It just, like, feels like all things are clicking, because that was a really fun team for me growing up in, like, the peak Mike Bray years. The team, I think, definitely peaked when I was a student, making back-to-back Elite Eights. So just would love to see them, like, at least be good. They don't have to be, Final Four material, but I want to have fun watching this team. And so far I have had fun watching them. Like, there's been a couple tough games, Mike, but the Missouri game was fun. The TCU game, even when Burton was out, like, the team rallied and won that one. They hung in there with Kansas and Houston in the Vegas tournament over Thanksgiving, which, by the way, 1:00 p.m. men's basketball during Thanksgiving week when you are really sick. I recommend it. It's a nice thing to have, it's a nice thing to have on. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Conference play starts at the end of the month, so we'll see how they do in the ACC.
You're first off, you're right. Like, this is a respectable looking outfit so far. And for Coach Shrewsbury, who in the last couple of years, like, we've seen some of the frustrations spill over to the podium in a way that made people wonder what the long-term future maybe looked like here. This is a lot more of what people expected. He came really highly regarded from Penn State. So I'm happy, you're right, to see this force restored. But can I tell you what a powerful weapon he just handed the football team?
Oh,
because
bragging rights now.
Jess, I've told you about, like, the basketball ego of football players being this absolutely insatiable. Like, we used to sit around in the locker room, I shit you not, and the guys on our team, because we, like you just talked about there, you've got still, even in this day and age, a lot of guys that play multiple sports in high school. And pretty much every football player would rather be a basketball player if they had their druthers. And we had guys sit around in our locker room building out a starting five that they believed in their heart of hearts could legitimately beat the starting five of our scholarship men's basketball team who did that full time. So to have the men's basketball coach say, oh yeah, they got some dudes that could ball over there is only going to make that conversation more and more like real in the minds of the football team.
You're absolutely spot on. But yeah, shout out to Mark Zachary. He played high school basketball at Ben Davis in Indianapolis. So he's going to be now back on the court with another Indiana alum, Jalen Harrelson. So I don't know. I'm excited to see if he like makes an impact there and see what this team can do. But you're right. The bragging rights are going to be insane, off the charts, just insane.
It's well, and I don't think the football guys play bookstore anymore. Like that used to be
probably
the
not
one
in this
place
era of
NIL.
Players getting paid. Yeah,
I genuinely wonder if that's something like not codified and written into deals, because we went through all that with the Charles Jagasaw injury last year, where people were talking about like what should or shouldn't be. But I do think that like even towards the end of BK's years, because when we got on campus, like my first or second year in South Bend, we had a team with Notre Dame football players on it, win in bookstore basketball. And Jess, you can inform me, like from the student population side of things, the energy I felt being at that final when the Notre Dame football players and the team won bookstore was a palpable tension. And when they won, the students around there were pissed. So I don't know if that's a sentiment that was often felt among the student body when it came to athletes participating in bookstore basketball, but I felt it on the court that day.
Certainly not from me, but I only participated in bookstore basketball 1 year, and basketball, let me tell you, as a former soccer player, basketball is not for me. I really is. It's a struggle, Mike. But yes, there is club and inter-team rivalries even on campus among people who all consider themselves Notre Dame fans, and feuding sports teams and I would say alliances too among many of the sports teams. So yeah, I think this is a very fun development, and I hope that it means that the basketball team will win more games. Now, while we're on the topic of basketball, before we get to our next segment on more football stuff, more news from the football team, KK Bransford from the women's basketball team injured this past weekend. We waited so long to do our basketball update. 2 starters on each team, or 1 starter on each team, 2 starters total, got injured, Mike. So KK, apparently not a season-long thing. She may be coming back according to Neil Ivey, but there is no specified timetable. But a huge bummer, because she was playing really well for this team and had just like elevated her game, which the women's basketball team needed her to do. They don't have a super deep rotation. So this is a huge bummer. But this team also, I would say, they're blowing out teams worse than them, like just like killing teams, Mike. Like Morehead State the other night, or James Madison was a little bit closer of a game, but Notre Dame had the lead the entire time. But women's basketball, very top-heavy sport right now, and it'll be interesting to see how they stack up to like a UConn next month, or some of the other top teams, even in the ACC. The ACC, like a couple of the favorites going into the season, haven't had good starts to their year, so maybe that does bode well for ND. But of course, there's whatever else is going on with the team and the rotation and the transfer players that they're trying to work in. Hannah Hidalgo will be there, averaging 25.9 points per game and 5.6 steals per game. Defensively, a absolute menace, and offensively, even in the game this past weekend against James Madison, didn't have her best offensive game, but Cass Prosper was there to clean things up. And Malaya Coles, the transfer from Wake Forest, has been really good the last few weeks too. So I'm hopeful that this team will be competitive in conference play. They won their first conference game against Florida State. It was not close a couple weeks ago, and pick up with Pitt on the 29th. So check that out if you are on Christmas break and want to see a little Notre Dame hoops action.
Notre Dame women currently 20th in the AP poll right now. They just dropped down 1 spot from 19th in the most recent poll. Jess, with all the things hanging in the balance there, you just mentioned injury-wise, let's assume KK comes back at some point in the middle of the season here, and they're able to get the most out of this roster. What do you think like the actual ceiling based on what you've seen is for this team, knowing the landscape of women's college hoops you described right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year the ceiling was that team could win a national championship. They had enough talent to win a national championship. They lost in the Sweet 16 round. I think this year, if this team makes a Sweet 16, I think that's a success. I wouldn't call it like, there's no such thing as a bridge year in college athletics anymore when you can take players from the portal. But I would say, knowing the amount of talent coming in next year's recruiting class, and you still have another year of Hannah Hidalgo, I think next year is going to be a much bigger year for Coach Ivy to like really figure things out with a much higher ceiling. I think like losing all of the players you did to the WNBA and the transfer portal this past spring put Notre Dame in a tough place. But I would still like, they absolutely should make the tournament. I think they should be competitive in the ACC. They may not be the best team in the ACC, but you have the ACC Player of the Year on your team, and I think like that has to count for something. So, but I mean, all of this is to be said. Like, this is where I'm thinking, like, with the baseline being what it is now, there's opportunities for players to improve, and I'm hopeful that we'll get to see some of that throughout the season, and then maybe they'll surprise me. But yeah, like the UConns of the world have right now, like, just insane levels of talent on them, and that's who Notre Dame's competition should be. You should be stacking yourself up against UConn, not against the middle of the pack ACC team. So maybe not the year for that, but still wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame does beat UConn, because they've in the words of our mutual friend Stugatz, they've had their number the past few seasons, Mike.
Very true. We can only hope, as someone that grew up in Central Connecticut, to see that help me out with the crowd back home, who always loves beating their chest over what UConn basketball has done on both the men's and women's sides there. So, yes, like you've mentioned a couple of times, unfortunate that it took us so long to get to basketball, that now we have two incredibly talented players sidelined and in the training room. Hopefully we'll get them back at some point this season and get to talk about them helping these teams make some noise in ACC play, like Jess mentioned. Let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll pick up where you left off, talking about the portal in women's basketball, and talk a little bit about what we expect Notre Dame to do as we get ready for the portal season opening up in January, and a little bit of an early look at 2026 next year on the Echoes. Welcome back to the Echoes at the Echoes ND Pod on social media. Check out our YouTube channel. See our bright, smiling faces. We always appreciate what's become a robust little comment section out there. We see some regulars in there every now and then, and we saw a lot of reaction to the Pete Bavacqua interview. So thanks to everyone for that. But now we're kind of doing the look out into the offseason a little sooner than expected. We'll get to kind of digest all this as it happens, because I cannot reiterate enough, we are still doing podcasts throughout the rest of the year. This is not something that stops with football season. I thought we made that clear off the top, but I've seen some comments that contradict that. So we are going to be here reacting to everything that you're seeing from all the other sports that we've talked about and love, but also what happens with football in the offseason. And Jess, we've already had some new bits of stimulus introduced into the equation. Kenny Minchey, Notre Dame's backup quarterback, it looks like is going to be in the transfer portal, joining Steve Angeli as recent Notre Dame backups to hit the portal and try and find work elsewhere. And Notre Dame linebackers coach Max Bulla accepted the job as linebackers coach and co-defensive coordinator at his alma mater at Michigan State. So, Jess, I mean, I guess working backwards from that one, since the linebacker room had been, outside of the defensive back room, maybe one of the groups to make so much progress in the last couple of years. Young leaders like Drake Bowen, who have done incredibly well, Jalen Sneed's development late in his career, KVA that we talked about so much. So certainly a big loss at that position on defense, but one that I can only throw my hands up and say thank you for everything. And I understand why you're doing this.
For sure.
We talk all the time. The pull of your alma mater is a really hard thing to resist.
Absolutely. And it sounded like he was someone that a lot of folks around Notre Dame thought would be the next staff member up for a big promotion, because of how successful he was, and like players really enjoyed playing for him, etc. So my thought on that is there's probably a long list and a short list. And if you're Marcus Freeman, there should be people that want to be on your staff. Like, there's already been a number of people, not just on the defensive staff, but also offensive staff, that have left his program with pretty good gigs afterwards. So you should kind of have your pick of this one. Like, maybe you find a guy with Notre Dame ties. There's a ton of former Notre Dame linebackers that are coaching in college football right now. Greer Martini, Maurice Crum Jr. on the SMU staff coaches linebackers. But yeah, shouldn't be too hard to fill this, I hope, Mike.
Let me tell you, Obviously the charge for Notre Dame is go out and find the best coach. To your point, you've got an incredible room to sell people. But if you were going to do the Notre Dame ties thing, I always tell people Mo Crum is one of the 2 or 3 best leaders I've ever been around in my life. Like he's one of those guys that was a captain when I first got to Notre Dame, and he was super banged up coming off, a down year for Notre Dame. But when he spoke, everyone stopped and listened. Like he was that guy in that locker room. So special leader, was a special player when healthy in South Bend, would certainly be, I'm sure, a name to keep an eye on. But this is a position where, nostalgia aside, like Notre Dame needs to continue to go out and find the best names at these spots because that's what their talent both demands and deserves, and I'm sure will attract. The Kenny Minchie portion of things, like this is another one like Steve. Totally understand. The guy went out there, had a chance to win the job in camp, didn't. Now, kind of like Steve. Now, Steve at least got to start the bowl game, had that game of tape to point back to. Obviously a 2-minute drill in the college football playoff is great, and I'm sure showed a lot of people, given that platform, his name if they didn't already know it. But both of those guys dealt with a deficit of game tape to walk out and show these other programs. But I guess if you're Kenny, the plus side of that, the glass half full, is, hey, look what happened for Steve Angeli in limited spurts this year. Look at how good Kenny was. I feel pretty good in saying whatever team gets Kenny Minchie is going to get a legitimate D1 starter that has a chance to make your team better based on what we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And this leaves Notre Dame with a little bit of need, I would say, at the backup quarterback position going into next year. I saw there's reports that Teddy Gerard may reclassify to 2026. But you don't have someone with a lot of experience in that room, and it's kind of hard to have that now because if you're someone whose eligibility is running out, you want to have a starting role somewhere and you want to try to cash out while you can. The example, of course, again, being Steve Angeli there. So interesting decisions for ND in the transfer portal. The transfer portal acquisition game, I would say, not the opposite side where Kenny Minchie is leaving. I would say it'd be nice to see them get another body in that room. It'd be nice to see like Will Pauling and Malachi Fields. They're out of time in college football. Sadly, I saw Malachi Fields was number 10 on Mel Kiper's 2026 NFL draft big board, Mike, at his position, and Eli Raridon at number 5 with the tight ends. So that's pretty solid for them. But yeah, there's going to be like offensively, and we don't need to rehash the whole Pop-Tart Bowl saga, but like offensively, there probably would have been a number of guys opting out that are looking ahead to NFL futures and possibly a number of underclassmen as well who are going to be key parts of next year's team that I would have been very upset to see get hurt. So kind of makes sense when you look at it from that angle.
Yeah, no, I think, again, not to rehash the whole thing, this ended up being a conversation about a lot more that Notre Dame wasn't involved in. Like, they just played the last LA Bowl this weekend. Notre Dame had no hand in the demise of that bowl game. There are larger forces at play, but this school is always going to draw a bunch of attention when you do something that's a little bit different the way that those guys did there. So I'm kind of with you on that.
I cannot believe there was a bowl game that soon after the season ended. Like, it totally took me by surprise, Mike. I was stunned when I turned on my television and watched a Notre Dame 2025 opponent, Boise State. They lost, but saw them playing against Washington on Friday night. That one blew me away.
That one was a little wild. So rest in peace to the LA Bowl presented by Rob Gronkowski. We hardly knew ye.
The bucked up LA Bowl, yeah.
The bucked up LA Bowl presented by Gronk. But you're right. There would have been a number of guys that wouldn't have been out there for one reason or another. And I don't know, as we get into this portal season, I think interesting places to keep an eye on that you just mentioned, right? As you look at people doing a lot of roster retrospectives right now. And what Notre Dame, I think, has done incredibly well under Marcus Freeman is go find those 1 or 2 pieces at key positions that can go and help your team. And some are going to be easier to see than others. Like, Devonta Smith, when healthy, was very much in that Jordan Clark mold of, hey, Notre Dame went and found a veteran player in a secondary that can plug into that nickel spot that's got, unique responsibilities in any defense, given what they're asked of in modern football. And so could a veteran at that spot, even with what you've got in Dallas Golden on your roster right now, be well served for this team? Probably. We saw how much depth hurt Notre Dame at times when you had veteran depth there that was replaced by young guys who took a while to get the experience they needed to be players and ultimately were. So, like, I think that's going to be one of those spots where, like, every year for Notre Dame, nickel and wide receiver will probably be places they look to veteran guys for some help. And I think this offseason will be no different. Like, those are two of the spots. I don't know if you look at any other position groups on this team where we talked about backup quarterback, nickel, wide receiver, certainly going to need that as well, even though there are talented guys returning.
Interior D-line probably is up there with that, with some of the guys that are leaving from that position. But yeah, it is definitely a fine line that you have to kind of tightrope walk if you're a team like Notre Dame that is trying to balance. Like, we believe in high school recruiting. We believe that that's like the foundation, but we do think we can supplement that with need positions. Fortunately, if your need positions are wide receiver and DB, those are positions that you can find in the portal versus if you're a university that's trying to like backfill an offensive line spot, which is a lot harder to find. So I think, yeah, I would expect, and also like Notre Dame, the way they've done it the last few seasons has been like, we're not going to kind of broadcast what we're looking at. We're just going to say when they join the team. So I wouldn't be, I kind of like, I'm a wait and see person with some of the portal stuff, but there, like last year, Malachi Fields was definitely on the radar of people following the beat. And then like, yeah, sure enough, he came along, but it would be great to have another Fields or Pauling, like a veteran type wide receiver who's like a leader on the team, who just kind of you plug in and is automatically productive to supplement a lot of the younger, not just younger guys at wide receiver group, honestly, because we do have hopefully like Jaden Greathouse coming back and Faison coming back, but supplement like, you know, a room that could use a little bit of help there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think to their credit, Notre Dame's done a good job of finding those guys that, you know, fit the culture that they're a part of. Like, Notre Dame's one of those programs, I don't think culture is a lip service word around there in terms of how that team operates. It's the reason why I think they've been so good at getting young guys ready to play. Defensively, what you brought up there is always a factor. Like, these guys are competitive, but the defense has done an especially good job. And part of that is just the nature of defense. Like, they play so many guys, and depending on the week, it was a varied amount of snaps for a lot of guys in that room. But you can always tell these guys, like, hey, we can find a role from you if you get here and are performing at that level. Like, they're not afraid to find a place for you in the way that defense is structured. And how wide receiver, like, one of them was named captain. Like, they have, again, done a good job of targeting guys that are going to fit well in those spots. So that'll be really interesting. But you're right. I think interior defensive line is a place like Jared Dawson was awesome when he was healthy and on the field for them. Like, I thought he was a player that absolutely was worth them bringing in, helped them in a position of need. Maybe Jason Onye gets a waiver to get to come back for another year. That would be huge. But like, you're losing Gabe Rubio, who was, when healthy on the field, your best defensive tackle. And so you're going to have to go in. I think also just like a premium on big bodies. That was something that early in the season we saw with Notre Dame. If you do want to have more of the 4 down stuff in your diet going forward, and you believe Bryce Young, if you believe Boubacar Traore could come back and a year removed from injury, be a healthier, more explosive player, to do that stuff, you also just still need a baseline of ass in the middle. Like, see what Georgia's built year after year. Like, you got to have some bosses in the middle that can hold up if you want to have a light box against these spread looks. And so I do think a premium on trying to find some beef in the middle would help.
I love having a baseline of ass, just generally speaking. And let's talk about the baseline of ass up front for the offensive line. If you had to project out your starting 5 for 2026 week 1 against Wisconsin at Lambeau Field, who is on your offensive line?
So the big outlier is probably going to be Billy Schrauth, and whether or not he decides to, you know, go pro coming off an injury certainly sucked. Now, it sounded like they expected if they made the playoffs, he would have been back and available for them.
Same with like point. 10 other players that would have been awesome to see come back for the playoffs, but I digress.
Yeah. No. So like, obviously that would be the biggest outlier is if he was back, if there, and this is like a process that I've heard talked about publicly. Like I remember, I think it was Brett Bielema came on Golic and Golic that I do with Dad and talked about it. And he's like, basically the conversation is, you know, you can show these guys, hey, this is what your NFL signing bonus would be if you were to leave now based on where you're projected, where your grade comes back. These guys can submit for grades from the league. And it's like a conversation of, hey, if our NIL can satisfy or offset what that would be, and it's advantageous for you to come back and develop, and some positions are different than others with that, that could be the conversation. So, Traore, Billy Shrouth are kind of both, potential candidates for that. I don't
Shrouth was
remember.
number 10 on the interior O-line big board that Kuiper put out like 3 days ago, and Traore was like also in consideration. So he wasn't in the top 10, but he was. But again, like that's a player where like maybe in the pre-NIL days, they're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the NFL. But now it's like, well, you can get paid more if you stay. So
yeah. So if Billy Shrouth's back, he's unquestionably one of your starting five. I think healthy Ashton Craig is still in that group. Gerby Lambert for sure in that group. I saw he was a freshman All-American by one of the outlets.
Yes, he was listed on the freshman All-American team by The Athletic. So that was nice.
So yeah, so like he's absolutely one of your best five. I think Sullivan Absher, quite frankly, the way he played for a lot of the year when he was filling in at left guard for Billy, would have a strong case for that. And then I think it's really like, and one of the biggest questions this offseason is, where were we at? The one injury I hadn't heard much about in terms of would he have been available for the postseason or not was Charles Jagasaw, who we know was injured before the season with the UTV injury, and it sounded like during the season didn't progress the way they wanted to try and bring him back then. But like, again, I'd still say the minute he steps on the football field would go back to being, in my mind, unquestionably Notre Dame's best offensive lineman. Like I still believe that now. We'll see if the attrition of injuries made it, self-worthwhile there, but he would absolutely be in that group. And then I think it's, that next spot you're looking at is some combination of like Emil Wagner can come back, correct? Like
I think, yeah.
He can come back and was a captain this last year. Anthony Knapp, I think after some struggles early in the season, played better ball at left tackle. So it'd be that. But like I look at and say, all right, for sure, it'd be Craig, Shrouth, Jagasaw, Lambert, and then some combination of Absher, Knapp, and Wagner for that, third or for that fifth spot there. And whenever order you want to get him on the field, like I think it's going to be very interesting and very telling. One, what happens with Charles. I've seen some people wonder if he might be a guy that they'd have to worry about going in the portal at this point based on how many, talented guys there are, guys still in the logjam there. I hope that's not the case. That's not based in like any reporting. Right. That's just, like what, could potentially be. I don't know anything on that. I don't want people to read into that. But it's just, stuff I've read in articles.
We're speculating here, okay?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's stuff I've read in articles around there of like people wondering would he or wouldn't he. But
right. But like I'm hopeful that he'll have at least one healthy season at Notre Dame because what happened this past year absolutely sucks for him. And it sounded like when I talked to him in the fall was a really tough injury to go through and a tough time for him personally as well as obviously professionally or athletically. But yeah, Mike, okay, so we've gone long on everything today. We were supposed to like, we're always like, okay, we're going to keep a tight 45.
Yeah.
No, never. So we were going to talk about the Dan Woken report that teams are, athletic directors are threatening to freeze Notre Dame out of future schedules. And then we were also going to talk about the John Orand story in Puck that was about he talked to the NBC Sports president about Notre Dame, and this NBC Sports president was like, we sell a lot of advertising for Notre Dame football, so we're pretty happy with things right now. But we can save that for later in the offseason because if we get a bunch of reports that like Alabama and Florida and Auburn are canceling their series with Notre Dame, I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about there. But if not, then we won't.
Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. I think I said this the other day. I don't think it was on here. If Notre Dame could really prompt a bunch of these high-level programs on their own to go and do this, because there's a thought from some, right? Like Texas and Sark were beating the drum for why did we schedule Ohio State out of conference if we're not going to get credit for that? Like everyone's already kind of itching to pull the trigger on this as they get ready to go for 9 conference games. Across the board. But if it was really Notre Dame as the impetus for all of these conferences saying we're going to freeze them out because we want Notre Dame to finally join a conference, then Notre Dame would officially be the single greatest unifying force in the history of college football, because not even the global pandemic could get these people on the same page and working together when it came to what their coherent plan was going forward. So I would be amazed if Notre Dame could be the force for that. As we talked about, they're not even the driving force for bowl games. So all of this just feels like we're very close to what happened. Everyone's reacting very strongly, and I think as we get further away from that, it's going to feel a bit less severe.
Yeah, I think it already does feel. I feel a lot different than our last recording, Mike. But yeah, this is going to be a long off season for the football team.
How do you feel in that regard? I'm curious. We've already gone long, so screw it. Like,
yeah,
how do
whatever.
you feel about that?
To be honest, the first round of the playoff going to be a hate watch for me. And based on the results, I think I may adjust my attitude moving forward. Like maybe I can convince myself mentally, like, we would have lost in the first round. We'd have missed a game-winning field goal. It's fine. That may perhaps also another position Notre Dame should be looking for in the portal, by the way. But I will, the more time that goes on, the longer or the better I think I will feel. But super bummed. I mean, I read a bunch of stories from like number cruncher folks who are like, yeah, Notre Dame would have had the third highest odds to win behind Indiana, Ohio State. And that made me feel bad. My best friend went to Indiana and she's like, you should come to the Rose Bowl with me. And I'm like, are you aware that Notre Dame would have played in that Rose Bowl had they stayed at number? No, you're not. That's fine. So yeah, there's been a lot of small insults the last week, but I am generally like, okay, well, we just got to move on to 2026.
Yeah, that is definitely become my larger takeaway. Is like Pete Bavacqua went out with the show of force. We appreciate him coming on our podcast. It's probably going to get very quiet for Notre Dame, and purposely so, coming up as they strategize what's happening going forward. You want to talk about the ultimate insult to injury, Jess? Did I tell you what game I'm going to cover for the playoff?
No.
So Bleacher Report, I went and did some coverage for them for like SMU Penn State last year, and getting sent to a game, and I thought it was going to be one of the like games that's on TNT air since I work for them. Bleacher's a part of that arm. No. I'm going to College Station.
To
do pregame for the Texas A&M Miami game.
I didn't know if it was going to be that or Oklahoma Alabama, because both would be a little bit of a slap in the face. But it's good when you feel wronged by two outcomes, not just one. Then it leaves you guessing at which thing's worse. But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the episodes to come. This will be a major talking point throughout the offseason, especially as we get more. We eventually do hear from Marcus Freeman and some of the other players on the team, et cetera. But for now, we'll leave it at that, and we will have plenty more where that came from. So stick around with us through this long football offseason, but still lots of things going on with ND. So we'll be here to keep you posted.
Yep. Thanks, guys. As always, go Irish.